Welcome to the Technology Pulse podcast, brought to you by Daily Computers, providing technology solutions to the public and private sectors in Maryland and Virginia for more than 35 years. Visit www.daly.com for more information. This episode is brought to you by Zerto, a Hewlett-Packard Enterprise company that brings together disaster recovery and data protection. And now here's your host, Rick from Daily.
Joining us today on the Technology Pulse podcast is Justin Windsor. He is the Zerto Public Sector Director. Justin, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, thanks for having me.
We are thrilled to have you today. And, Justin, we're going to be talking about the educational environment today, particularly when it comes to interruptions. And, I understand that this is really something that affects a lot of folks because, again, it's not just the students, it's the parents, it's the staff, it's the faculty, it's the administration, it's the county. The ripple effect on an educational environment is pretty massive when you really think about it. And so I understand that, we're going to be talking about that. Before we get into that, though, I did want to have you introduce yourself a little bit. Let us know, your role at HPE, how long you've been there.
I'm on the HPE side of the house, more on the data protection side of the house with Zerto, which was a company that was acquired by HPE in October of 2021, to be exact. Lead all of our channel business. So from a HPE perspective and a Zerto perspective, all our business runs through our, channel partner network, our community, our family. Prior to my appointment here at HPE, I've been in the channel for the last 6 years. Prior to that, I was with a reseller out of Maryland, Alliance Technology Group. Prior to that, I was a school teacher. So when you're talking about outages and disrupting business from an education perspective, it definitely hits home at me because, just a really quick, kind of a funny, not really a funny story, but, I remember there was a time when, there was a teacher who was, absent and we had a sub, but that teacher did not make all the copies of paperwork for the students' worksheets that day. And the printer went down. So so the substitute, she had a classroom full of kids and no worksheets and the printer was not working, right? I know that's very kind of somewhat pedestrian comment in that regard, but that's the whole point when we're talking about outages in any business. It's more than just the printer issue, right? In that example. So it's definitely a huge pain point that a lot of organizations are facing, and education from a vertical perspective is no different.
No, and that's absolutely true. And what you named was one little specific incident. You had a teacher that didn't have, what they needed and didn't have the technology to deliver it. But we don't stop and realize that even though you sit there and say, oh, okay, well, that's just the printer in one classroom. It's really not, because again, how many students did that affect that day? And then those students are behind. And then it affects the teacher who was out, whose lesson plan then gets gunked up, because the students got an unexpected study hall. And the students sit there and think, well, this is just fine. That I don't have my lesson today, but it's really not, because it throws everything off. And again, we talk about that ripple effect.
No, 100,000%. And my son, Liam, I love him more than anything in this whole world, right? But if there's a day it goes, Dad, I don't have any homework, I'm like, I'm going to go with no. You probably do, right? And to your point, yeah, maybe you don't have homework that day, but at some point you're going to have to do it, right? So now you have that teacher who's coming back, the next day, thinking ABCD got done, didn't get done, all the changes thereafter. Then the parents get upset because maybe there's 2 homeworks and it's just this whole thing. So, it definitely is. There's much more to the story than just, again, to your point, Rob, just the printer being out. And I think that's hopefully a good example to talk about. If there's outages in a school, it affects more than just, one of those audiences.
Definitely. Now, from your side of the house, obviously you're in data protection. What are you seeing as the biggest type of disruption that, K-12 or any educational facility could potentially have these days?
Yeah. And I think, this is probably not going to come as a shock for what I'm about to say. It's ransomware, right? Right now, of all the verticals, audiences, whatever you want to call it, the number one attack vector from the bad guys, the common crew in China or other countries, they're attacking schools, right? That's number one. Yes, do they go after healthcare and government and just general enterprise? Of course they do, right? But the reason they're going after K-12 is, as you already kind of illustrated, walk through that example with the printer. the ripple effect is huge. If a school is down, right, which we're expanding upon, there's tons of services and things not going to be able to happen. There's going to be tons of impact. So I think the number one thing that schools right now are getting hit with is in fact ransomware.
And then when you're talking about all those systems that are down, again, we're not just talking, okay, their Chromebooks don't happen to work that day, right? I mean, we're talking about a heap of stuff here.
Oh, I mean, yeah, again, given the fact that I was a school teacher and given my son's 13, you really just kind of take a step back and you realize how many platforms are out there. I mean, I'll just talk about a couple. You talk about like a learning platform, Google Classroom, Canvas, Moodle, like there's tons of those, right? If PowerSchool is down from an SIS perspective, that's an issue. What about, how many school systems use Google, right? Or Microsoft Office 365? Do kids also have STEM programs that tie into technology? What happens if, an app like Class Dojo is down, right? People can't communicate. You don't know if your kid's actually in school, right? What happens if, there's an attack and all the, filtering of the internet is not up and running anymore, and now it's not meeting compliance with the Children's Internet Protection Act, right? So there's tons of systems that impact a school day, from the time that even before the kids get there, making sure the teachers are logged in, making sure they can get paid for being there, making sure the kids are checked in, making sure that the grading can happen, making sure their attendance is being taken. There's just so many interoperative, kind of things there that if it's down, there's going to be a huge impact. And again, that really, hopefully not belabor the point. There is a reason that the number one thing being attacked right now, ransomware wise, is K-12.
And, we hear the same kind of story from a lot of different folks when we start talking about this data protection, because it really is important. And you always hear that the same, I don't want to call it an excuse, but we'll call it a justification instead. The justification that I don't have true data protection is because we back up everything.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody falls behind that backup like it is a foxhole on a battlefield. We always try to get the point across that, grenades get into foxholes too.
No, it's true. And I'm not, I'm not saying anything that's not in a sense public knowledge, right? But I mean, don't you think Target had really good technology? Don't you think MGM had really good technology, right? And even here more locally. I mean, PG County schools here in Maryland just got hit with ransomware last month, right? A couple of years ago, Baltimore County schools had a huge incident. Took them $9 million on their recovery effort, and they didn't report the attack for 5 months. So it's not a question of if, it is a question of when. So as much as we would fully support customers having backups, right? A traditional backup will take you a very long time to pull your data back from. There was another account that got hacked a few years ago. They spent $50 million to pay the ransomware, right? They figured out in that evaluation, it would have taken them 3 months, 90 days to get back applicable data, right? Since then, they heard about Zerto. They became a Zerto customer. And guess what happened? They got hit again. But because of the technology that Zerto has here from an HPE perspective, from a data protection perspective, now their response time of, okay, it's going to take 3 months is now down to hours. And that's kind of the challenge, is that, yes, you need backup, Mr. Customer. From an HPE Zerto perspective, we are not backup. We can talk about kind of who we are, what we do later. But that's the question. You can have, I give you another example. I was in Florida this week, and someone said a really good example, right? And said, hey, look, you can build a castle. 100,000% you can, with the guards, and you can have remote. But guess what? If someone knocks on that door and you let them in, it doesn't really how good the soldiers in mode is, because they're still going to get in. And that's the whole point. These bad actors, when they hit a customer, right? And obviously, relative to this conversation, education, they don't go in traditionally day one and take all of the crown jewels. They don't. They go in day one. They figure out kind of where we can be impacted. Does our ransomware, does this technology affect Google Classroom? Does it affect Class Dojo? And then little by little, they start knocking these things out. And then before you know it, again, PG County schools, Baltimore County schools, like, wow, we're getting hacked big time. But without the technology to really identify that much faster, again, just relying on backup, that's not a good defense.
Right. And that is the thing. A lot of people see these movies, the heist movies.
Oh, yeah.
Where they come to this person and this person comes up with a plan in 10, 15 minutes, and they're in, they get what they need and they're out. And that's strictly in the movies. Just like you said, it's more like the movies where the person comes in and goes undercover and is deep undercover for 2-3 years before they finally make a move. They're just lying in wait.
But no, you're 100% correct. And that's the thing that these, the guys and girls that are going after environments, they don't care. This is what they do for a living, right? They legit wake up and their job is to attack as many things as possible. And to your point, they're going to keep going after it. And if they find some sort of thing, they want to see, okay, I'm in. How far can I get? Like to your example, okay, I just walked in the house and they have, a piece of art on the wall. Okay, I'm going to take this, but I don't want them to know, so I'm going to get out real quick. And then, honey, guess what? We need to, okay, and then they put up a defense, a wall to protect all of their artwork. Well, they figured out how to get in. Now they're going to get in again. They're going to take your jewelry. And then, oh, by the way, they found out there's a safe and there's money. Like, that's how these attacks happen. It's just not a one-time thing. And the reason it's not a one-time thing is because customers have backup and they have firewalls and they have SOC. They have all these SOC as a service. If all these different defenses, all these different walls around, again, their castle, at some point they're going to get in. And when that happens, how quickly can you recover? And as much as we're sitting here talking about, ransomware, that's a huge thing. What happens if your schools, think about all, not a good story, but think of the impact that Hurricane Katrina had, down in Louisiana. Schools are down. In some cases, there is not a school left, right? So we can say you're talking about the threat of ransomware because it is prevalent. But really, when you're talking about how do you achieve an educational business that doesn't have downtime, it's all of that. It's natural events. It's ransomware. It's, someone walked into the data center and unplugged the cord, right? There's all these different variables. And if we're not ensuring that our students and our teachers have this uninterrupted, educational environment, there's going to be some problems with that. So
no, and that's a great point, because a lot of people think that you have this issue where it's just one thing. Okay, well, as long as we've got, as long as we're protecting our data from, again, outside intrusion from bad actors, that we're okay. But as you said, there are any number of things. It's not just protecting against ransomware, because if you fortify everything at the front door to make sure nobody gets in there, and then all of a sudden the pipe bursts in the house, you're in the same boat. So in literally a boat if the pipe bursts. So again, it's trying to make sure that folks understand protection needs to come from multiple angles.
Yep.
It's like when you're driving a car, you're not just worried about everything that's in front of you. You got to be worried about what's to the side of you, what's behind you, what's in the passenger seat next to you, what's in the trunk. You've got to literally think about all these different things. And that's one of the things we're really trying to hope that we get that message across through this podcast and through all of the other efforts that we have to try to make sure that people understand protecting your data isn't just about backing it up, and it's not just about protecting against one type of threat.
100%. And if you really kind of think about it too, what's the number one currency right now in the world? One could say it's money. No, it's not. It's data. It is the most important thing, right? Data is the new currency. That's just the way it is. And that's why it's being impacted in such a manner that every day you hear about another school system, another business, someone has ransomware breach, patient records were compromised, credit card information, social security numbers. Like, it happens every single day, and it will always continue to happen because these, again, the bad actors, they're not going to stop, right? And you have to build up all these different walls to all these different issues. And the challenge is, I think maybe conceptually, sometimes I think people may say, yeah, that's true, I need to do all that. But again, going back to the print analogy that we kind of kick off the podcast with, IT teams of school systems they're very lean, right? They're a very well-worked group. They do a great job, but they have tons of responsibility. They have to make sure that all those software, cloud-based applications, most cases that we talked about earlier, MLS, so on and so forth, they're up and running. They got to make sure that the printers work. They got to make sure that if, a teacher deletes her email by accident, like, they're just so busy and they don't have the time all the time to invest in technology. And even if they had the time to invest in technology, they don't have the time during the course of the day to sit there and look at everything in real time because they got 15 other things to do, right? So when you look at that, it only is, again, why is it being attacked so much? It's because the impact it has, as we talked about, but it's also they're attacking organizations where they know that they don't have someone that, 365, 24/7 in a sense, just looking at their data every single day, right? So when you look at all of that, I think, again, conceptually, there's some IT, guys and girls in education that probably know all of that, but they don't have the time to research all these technologies. They don't have the time to do all this kinds of evaluation. They certainly don't have the time to do a live DR test. Okay, if we get impacted by something, what is the cost of that, right? And I say cost, i.e. downtime. They don't have time to do that in the course of the day. So then when something happens, yeah, they have great backup, like you said. Yeah, they have firewalls, and they did the best they could. But unfortunately, they're still going to get in.
And when you're talking about that downtime, because again, another one of the justifications that we tend to get is, well, we don't have the budget for that. Mm-hmm. And, data protection just isn't in the budget because they look at it almost like it's an extraneous thing because, again, they've got their backups. Huh. But you sit there and you think about, the reputational loss is just huge. So you can't even start to quantify that in dollars and cents. I mean, you could, but you really shouldn't. But if you're just talking about downtime, because like you said, implementing those backups and finding the good backup point, because, okay, well, the ransomware attack happened now, but when was the data actually corrupted? So now you got to go back and find that. And so finding that sweet spot, needle in a haystack, and there's not a magnet to be found, and you're going through that. So you've got all of this downtime. I mean, do you guys even try to quantify what that downtime costs K-12 institutions?
Yeah, 100,000%. And I'll answer that question with just, furthering your comment. So let's just say you're a school system, a district, a parish, ISD, whatever you are, right? You do a backup because you need backup, and everything runs, and you do a nightly backup at 10 o'clock at night. Fantastic, right? At 6 a.m., you take a snapshot, right? You get hit with some sort of ransomware, right? Whatever you want to call it, cyber threat at 10 a.m. Well, guess what? You're going back 4 hours and you have no idea in that 4 hours when something happened. As we kind of quantify that out from, a dollar and cents perspective, okay, I'm doing backup. Great. And in some cases, they might say, yeah, I'm actually also replicating my storage, right? What we kind of find if you are running your backups and you traditionally have an RPO, recovery point objective, and then you have an RTO, recovery time objective, right? Those are kind of the quantifiable metrics when it comes to, how quickly and what is the cost of, how quickly you'll be up and running again, and again, associated cost, right? So on that traditional spectrum, right, a daily backup, you're probably going back a number of hours. So your RTO also will be that. So on average, if we see an RTO, recovery time objective, that usually 8 hours equals $8 million, right? So there's a huge financial impact, right? If you're doing like a storage-based replication, your RTO, right? Again, it goes down, but that's still a huge impact. For the technology we have here at HPE, from a data protection perspective, we can get their RPO, recovery point objective, anywhere between 5 and 10 seconds, right? That RTO, which we talked about earlier, was 8 hours. We get down to 10 minutes. So if you just, again, take that out from a numbers and dollars and cents perspective, if your RTO, recovery time objective, is 8 hours on average, again, always exceptions higher or lower, tends to be around $8 million. With our technology, an $8 million impact is now less than $50,000.
And a lot of people don't realize, because again, we're going to go back to the ripple effect. You're going to see this all come full circle, because that downtime doesn't just include the systems. Because go back to the teacher without the printer. The teacher couldn't do anything that day. Well, imagine that multiplied by the entire school and then multiplied by multiple schools throughout a county school system. And you start to realize that's a lot of people sitting around not being able to do what they need to do. They're sort of making do the best that they can, sort of filling in the gaps where they can, but they don't know what the gaps are. And it's just that it snowballs.
Yeah. And the teachers are still getting paid, and yes, they're still paying for the air conditioning in the buildings, but no one's really doing anything. Right. And then the kid's like, oh, I don't have to do any work today. This is great. Right. And then the teacher has to deal with a kid whose maybe attention's not so great because he can't do the worksheet. Like, there's just so many little domino effects. And at the end of the day, as we talk about technology, I always kind of share this story because, it's hard to believe right now it's the middle of March. I think we all go like, well, I can't believe it's blank. It's almost Christmas, whatever it is. But I remember seeing a really long time ago, I still was in college. I went to Towson University, and I remember seeing, and this is right when cell phones had just started to hit the market more so. And I remember seeing, a nice business lady on a commercial, and she was like, thanks to this, and she was holding her cell phone, my customers can reach me at any time. And I remember, again, Rob being a college student, go, well, that sounds terrible. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want people calling me at all hours of the night. Of course, now I'm in sales and I have a cell phone, and that's fine. Don't get me wrong. But really, that, I think, is kind of the catalyst of, we live in this world of instant gratification, social media. You can't have downtime. You can't. I mean, case in point, I remember like last week, Instagram was like, went down for a couple hours. Like, did someone hack into my Instagram? Like, again, just a personal story, nothing to do with business, nothing with education. But that's the world we live in. You can't have downtime. One of our customers, not education, is United Airlines. They figured out that if their front end application is down, it costs them $1 million an hour. That's business. If you're not making, Southwest, like they're still, I still think, to your point, ripple effect, I still think they're feeling some of those impacts. With United, they now know that it's protected by Zerto. And that, again, we talked about earlier, RPO, recovery point objective. Now they can go back 8 seconds on average, protecting over 4,000 VMs. Right. And this is the world we live in. It has to work all the time. So think of the burden it places on that IT team, the CIO, the CISO, whatever from that school board, that district, that they have so many other things to worry about. And if something goes down, remedying that in a very quick manner can become a huge challenge.
Right. And that's the thing. It really is one of those things where every second counts, right? And like you said, $1 million an hour, some people are going to listen to that figure and they're going to sort of roll their eyes. But when you stop and you think about it, like you said, you're running the electricity, you're running the air conditioning, everybody in the building is still getting paid. The IT staff is on triple time because they're stretched so thin. You have to bring in an outside consultant to try to help with things. You start adding all of that up, and it really does mean that every moment is some sort of lost something. Whether it's lost productivity, whether it's lost revenue, or not necessarily lost revenue, but increased expenditures, we'll say, for like a school perspective or a county government perspective or local government perspective, and then all the mishmash that you have to do trying to catch up from that point. Yeah. So it's one of those things where anybody who's going to sit there and say seconds don't count, seconds count.
Seconds count. They have huge impacts, and there's just give maybe a bigger definition of how big of a problem this is, because I think sometimes it's like, oh, I'm good. It happened to like insert customer name. I guess they didn't have the same backups I did, or they didn't have the same firewalls. It won't happen to me. And then you know what? It happens, right? And just to give you some numbers on that, from 2018 to mid part of 2023. School downtime in K to 12 equaled $53 billion of downtime. $53 billion. Right? We can sit here and talk about, the big ones that we know about, right? But there's tons of other ones. Guess what? They don't make the front page of the news, but they have. So we're talking $53 billion in downtime, and breaching, again, in this stat from, 2018 to 2023, 6.7 million personal records were compromised. So again, it's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
Always want to make sure that people understand that we're not just trying to scare you. We're not in the horror story business. We're simply in the business of trying to explain to you, here's the world that you live in. But while you live in this world, we also have a way for you to not be as concerned as you would if you weren't protected. So talk a little bit about Zerto and your technology and how it can help folks in the K-12 industry.
If we look about Zerto, again, Zerto was founded in 2009. They were the first to come to market offering hypervisor-based replication, and then acquired again by HPE in October of 2021. And HPE made that purchase, right, if you will, because they sense what Zerto was doing. So what we do at Zerto is really give power back to those guys and girls that felt like power was being taken away from them, right? So for what we do, it's really three key pillars, right? One, disaster recovery, and I'll get into that a little bit more in a minute. Two, ransomware resiliency, right? And three, cloud migration, right? If you take a name, if you say, well, why do they choose Zerto, right? It's an interesting name. Zerto equals, let's get as close as we can to zero RTO, because recovery time, that's how long you're down. So that's our goal. So really what Zerto is, in a very simplistic fashion, is we protect the crown jewels of an organization, right? We are the DVR. To make it even, another example, we are a DVR for your environment, right? So that way, I'll give you a quick example. We're going back to my example earlier. Okay, we ran a backup at 10 o'clock at night. We did a snapshot at 6 a.m. We got impacted at 10 a.m. We got to go back 4 hours and we got to find the needle in the haystack, right? And then we have to fix the problem after we do it. Maybe we get to your point, we got to bring in a consultant or whatever, right? So what Zerto does is we create checkpoints, not snapshots, checkpoints. So every 5 seconds, we're taking a look at your environment and we're just checking to make sure everything is normal, right? So in my example, there was a 4-hour gap. If that customer who had a 4-hour gap because they did a snapshot at 6 a.m. and got breached in that window, we would know at 9:59:55, okay, everything's great. And at 10 a.m., the IT person would be notified something looks different. So again, when you talk about that from a business value perspective, 5 seconds, 4 hours. That then produces those lower R2 or RPO objectives as we talked about earlier, right? So that's really what we do. It's really ensuring that the number one currency out there, your data, is protected at all times. And in the event, when it happens, we give you the tools to see it in a sense, near synchronous, replication. So you're seeing it pretty much in real time. And then you have, whatever tool set you have in your arsenal to go out and remedy the problem.
And that's always what we want to do, is we want to make sure that people understand there are issues out there, but we have solutions. And it's about disaster recovery. But where you're talking about resiliency, and you talk about, this is not just solving one problem. This is not just looking out the windshield. This is solving multiple issues. This is helping to protect you in multiple ways. And that's really what K-12 educational facilities need. They need that resiliency. They need that multiple angle of protection and recovery and all of that lumped together, because again, it's a challenging world. And we've come so far with educational technology these days that when it goes down, we were joking just before we started recording, technology is great until it isn't. And that's usually when it stops working.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, one thing, as I always say, is IT is great, but guess what? It'll happen, right? It will. It does, right? And that's really the thing. I mean, our technology is really trying to identify whatever the anomaly is within seconds. So that way the exposure is then again limited, right? And then that person now has the tools and the power to take action, remedy that. It's an IT resiliency platform, right? And there's reasons that we have customers like Houston ISD, LA County Schools, here locally, DeWitt of Maryland is a, Zerto customer, right? So we've got a lot of good, success stories. And it's really that. It is that platform that, hey, if and when it happens, because again, it will, how quickly can you get up and running? How can you ensure that downtime is, again, minimized? And then you brushed upon it earlier. Like, what's the public fallout, right? Southwest Airlines, had all those issues, a couple of years ago, right? And again, I'm not bashing Southwest Airlines because I was on a Southwest Airlines flight yesterday. But what I will say, these $49 flights, they keep getting extended a lot, right? So again, there's a public fallout. And I give you another, real world example. I had a buddy. Oh, I still have a buddy. It's not like we're not friends anymore. But he was going to MGM for his bachelor party. About a month. His date was about a month after the breach. Guess what? Canceled his reservation because he's like, have I been hacked now? How many people go, you know what? I don't want to stay at MGM because, right. Or, you know what? I don't know if I should go to Target. You can never, and from a school system, who's, they're in a business, if you will, they're in a business of educating children in their community, right? And they want to, help as many children as possible. But, what if parents go, well, we were going to move to that county. Now we're not, right? There, again, to your point, you can't quantify that, in a sense, soft costs, but when if you're front page news, it also can be a resume draining event for sure.
Yeah, for years I worked in the cybersecurity realm and always used to preach, and it was really about small businesses at the time. But I mean, it's applicable anywhere. The reputational damage is something that can't be quantified. Just like you said, don't want to move there because I don't want to be in that school because that school system got hacked. Don't want to be in that county because that county got hacked. Don't want to, that again, you start talking about the ripple effect. And so now you've lost, the revenue that you would have gotten from the home sale, or from the rental, and you've got the lost tax base, and I mean, just so on and so forth, and you can't ever get that back.
You can't. I mean, and you can have an outage, whatever you want to call it. You can go back. You can go on CNBC. You can go on, WJZ. Talk to. I don't know if Marty Bass. I now live in North Carolina. I don't know if Marty Bass still does the morning news, but it was Marty and Don Scott. Those were good times. And you could go back, right, and do Manic Monday with Ron, and as he was singing it back in the day. And you can say, yeah, just let, kind of, from an audience perspective, just let everyone know, yes, we had that incident back in January. Since then, we've done A, B, C, D. They're not going to care. Great. Why didn't you do that beforehand? Like, why did you need something to happen before you actually fixed it? Right. And that's the whole point, with Zerto, again, from HPE, that's what we allow customers to do. We allow them to basically create an always on environment, right? Because again, in that 5 seconds, if something happens, you now have the power to go back and fix it. We have, again, another customer that they have, offices, nationwide, but they're two of their bigger data centers, right? One's in Chicago, one's kind of close to the Gulf of Mexico. So when it's hurricane season, guess what? They move all of their workloads up to Chicago. When hurricane season's over, they move them all back. So for us, from a Zerto perspective, as long as it's a virtualized environment, we have the ability to help customers. Now, that virtual machine, that VM, right? It can sit on the customer site. It can be in Google. It can be in Amazon. It doesn't really matter. Again, it doesn't matter where it is, right? So that's I think, a good, attribute of Zerto as far as keeping that always on kind of mentality. And the other thing, and I kind of hit at it earlier, go to a school system around and say, okay, if you got hacked today, what's your downtime? And they go, well, we are doing backups, so we think, again, and then it's obviously probably more so than that guy or girl thought. With Zerto from HPE here, guess what you can do? You can do live DR testing with no impact to production. So you can say, okay, we have Zerto. It's in our environment. If something happened today, power cord gets knocked out, tornado, ransomware, whatever, how long are we down for? Like, you can quantify that now, and then you can go back to whoever you're paying cyber insurance, and maybe that goes down now because guess what? We've upped our game, right? We don't need so much insurance because we can, and then in that case, maybe sometimes things pay for themselves. So, I mean, we just live in this always on kind of world. That's just the way it is. Most of IT is virtualized. And again, there is a reason HPE spent a lot of money to get Zerto. And we're really happy to be part of all that is HPE.
Nope. And we're thrilled to be able to offer this to our customers and our, anybody out there who's listening. So again, if Zerto is something that you need more information on, if this is something that you've listened to and now you're not going to get to sleep very well for the next couple of nights, we've got an easy solution for you. All you need to do is visit Daly's website, pick up the phone, send us an email, and we're happy to connect you with Justin because Justin, I know that you are anxious to talk to these folks.
Yeah, 100,000. I mean, again, I was a school teacher. I have, my son's in school. We all want to empower our children to be the best they can be. I think we all want that as parents, right? But I just think from a very humanistic perspective, we should always want to give, our children the best experiences they can, teach them the best we can. Again, I was a teacher. And I think anything that we can do to ensure that there is continuity in their education is huge. And again, obviously we now kind of live in this post-COVID world, but I mean, you think of the impact that COVID had. Yes, okay, kids could work remotely. Okay. But guess what? They weren't having lunch with kids. They weren't kicking the soccer ball at the playground. Like they just couldn't do those things, right? Hopefully now we're kind of, getting back to more normalcy going forward. But there's an impact and things are down. And I think a technology like Zerto does allow, those in education the ability to sleep at night. Again, this is a software product. It is very easy to install. I am by no means a technical person, but I can install it. It's very easy with orchestration and automation to have this working in real time. And you can kind of, I hate saying you can kind of set it and forget it, but guess what? Kind of set and forget it. And then when something happens, boom, now you know.
Fantastic. Justin, any final thoughts before we wrap up today's episode?
Final thoughts. I hope the Orioles win the World Series. I'm upset the Ravens didn't sign Patrick Queen. But no, I think that's about it.
But they got Derrick Henry.
Got Derrick Henry, which is good. I always, he's been a great player in rushing yards, all these things. Like, much like a Saquon, you do start just wondering. And again, this is not a disrespect of Eric DaCosta in any way, shape, or form, because much like Ozzie, he knows what he's doing. But I think if there is one, we'll see, he is an older running back. And those running backs, they take a beating out there. And if Derrick Henry can be as productive as he has been, then it's certainly a very good signing by the Ravens. I think it's a nice 1-2 punch, him and Lamar. I wish we'd have run more than 6 times in the playoff game. But, there's always next year. And for us, I guess it starts now.
That's true. Just do me a favor. Do everything you possibly can to keep Taylor Swift off the field again.
Yeah.
That's all I got to say.
Listen, I am, if you're anyone out there, if you're a Swiftie or your daughters are a Swiftie, that's great. It's awesome. She's amazing, a great musician and all that. But, I think this probably sounds like more like a guy comment. So any ladies listening, I apologize. Because I'm sure the ladies love football. Don't get me wrong. But if you're a guy and you watch football, you're going to watch football. Like that's why you put it on for,
That's right. I tell people all the time, if suddenly during the Taylor Swift concert, they started showing NFL highlights, you'd hear a lot of boos.
Yeah. No one would care about watching, OBJ one-handed catch years ago in the Giants right after T Swift sings 22, right? Which now, funny I say that, I wonder if that, Derrick Henry has a walkout song. Will it be T Swift 22?
That would be amazing.
That would be fun.
Justin, we really appreciate you joining us today. This has been fantastic. And again, we really hope to get folks to reach out to you and find out so much more about Zerto's technology and how it can help them.
Yeah, 1,000%. And again, I would also finish this. We have a really good partnership with Daily, a leader in, selling, very nice technology and working to solve customer problems, in this geography. So we're very thankful for that partnership. We have the sales guys and girls and engineers to support, our customers out there. How can they bring this environment? How can they demo it? How can they, work with Daily to get it, at a very good price point to, again, fit that budget. And to your point, it is something that we feel that every customer should have a Zerto in there just because of the world we live in. And we definitely make it, very affordable to keep the lights on, for education customers.
Perfect. Justin, thanks again for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you, and we look forward to talking in the future.
Excellent. Sounds good. Thanks again.
And that wraps up another insightful episode of the Daily Technology Pulse podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Before we sign off, we want to take a moment to remind you of some important legal considerations. The views and opinions expressed by guests on the Daily Technology Pulse podcast are their own and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Daily Computers or its partners. The content provided in this podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be considered as professional advice. No part of this podcast may be reproduced, distributed, or transmitted in any form or by any means without the prior written permission of Daily Computers Inc. If you have any comments, questions, or suggestions, please feel free to reach out to us. You can find us at www.daly.com. The Daily Technology Pulse podcast will be back with more exciting discussions on the latest in technology. Until next time, stay curious and stay connected.